Hoosier Nation, we made it through the offseason. It's been a while since Indiana last played. We left them on kind of a sad note. Dexter Williams got injured. Indiana lost to Purdue. Season ended with 4 wins. But to Tom Allen's credit and to the coaching staff's credit, there was a lot of transformation that took place. A lot of the familiar faces you're aware of from those teams that won in 2019 and 2020, they're out the door. There is almost nobody left. We got Noah Pierre, we got Aaron Casey, we got Matt Bedford, and not much more than that. Season openers on Saturday. The number 3 Ohio State Buckeyes are coming to town. The Hoosiers will play the first Big Ten game on CBS in a long time, if not ever, 3:30 on Saturday afternoon. Matt and I are going to dive into this matchup, what you need to know as you head into IU's big showdown this week. What are we looking to learn from this team in the season opener before week 2 against Indiana State? And then wrap up with a little IU basketball because we had some news there as well. We're going to discuss all of that and so much more here on episode 304 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this episode of the Hoosier Sound on Monday, August 28th, 2023. Matt, this is Tom Allen's 7th year at Indiana. The lowest over-under we've seen in a long time. It's 3.5 wins. Indiana did pull off a couple of Big Ten wins last year in exciting circumstances. The entire conference is transforming a year from now. What are you looking forward to IU football this season and then Saturday against the Buckeyes?
So IU football this season, I mean, there's a ton of young talent and transfers to kind of like there's a bunch of new faces basically, or faces that were not properly used last year. They'll have a bigger role, right? For instance, the defense, there's only 2 returning starters, right? And most of the starters this year are probably going to be transfers. You look at on offense, you had a really promising transfer, go down, wide receiver go down, start of last season. You have Jalen Lucas was barely used. You have Donovan McCulley, who was a position change, who is then, they didn't force him to play QB or anything, but like with the QB situation, wasn't able to kind of show his new acquired skill set, right? Yeah. And then you get rid of an offensive line coach, you add a new one. There's a whole bunch of moving pieces. You have new offensive coordinator, or same offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. Sorry, a whole bunch of moving pieces on this football team. So again, there's a lot of question marks, which makes it fun. But also slightly terrifying, right? And that's why you have a over that is at 3.5, right? Because there's a lot of things that could, could go, south, right? There's too many moving parts, right? To have a safe bet and be like, oh yeah, they're for sure gonna challenge for a bowl game, which they very well could. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
No, it wouldn't shock me.
But it wouldn't shock me. Would them beating Ohio State shock me? Absolutely. Right. But would them, playing up to Ohio State in the first game shock me? Absolutely not. So that's what, to look forward to. I don't think Indiana's going to win this game. I don't think that's a hot take. Indiana doesn't have anywhere near the talent that Ohio State has at its disposal. I mean, Ohio State goes 3 deep in almost every single position. They might have the best player in college football playing wide receiver than for Marvin Harrison. I don't think that's too hot of a take. And they might have the second best wide receiver on the same team, which is crazy. So we'll see how Indiana fares. I think my thing that I'm looking for the most this game out of everything, Nathan, is how does the offensive line fare, right? If our corners can't keep up with the 2 of the best wide receivers in the country, that's fine. If our defensive line isn't getting pressure on Ohio State's offensive line, Ohio State's offensive line is going to be like 5 NFL guys. It's whatever. Like, that's fine. Sure. If our offensive line can hold their own against Ohio State's defensive line, then all of a sudden my season expectations grow because now we're going to have possibly a working QB behind, or at least a walking QB.
Sure.
Not in a, not in a knee brace, not in a stretcher, not in, a cast, right? And give us a fighting chance in games like against Michigan State, against Rutgers, against
Maryland,
right? Like the teams that Indiana should be able to compete with, they'll give IU a fighting chance in winning those games. IU's going to have less and less of a chance the worse the line play, but no, worse specifically the offensive line is. But I've only heard good things. I mean, not that we were going to hear bad things out of training camp,
but worse compared to last year, right?
Right. But I've heard much better things going into this year, talking about the new offensive line and how everything looks under the new coach. So I'm a little bit optimistic going into game one about the offensive line play. We'll see if that gets immediately shut down. But
yeah, I mean, if you're not optimistic, you're not a football fan, right? This is that time of the year. You should be feeling good about your team. You should be looking forward to the ball getting kicked off on Saturday. Of course, week 0 was awesome. Matt, you and I watched a bunch of games together on Saturday. It was good times as usual.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked your point about the offensive line earlier today. Tom Allen, Walt Bell, as well as defensive coordinator Matt Guerrieri, co-DC, but defensive play caller Matt Guerrieri, all spoke to the media. Walt Bell mentioned he's got 7 to 8 guys that he feels comfortable with going forward this season on the O-line, which is a bit of a departure from the last couple of years. You didn't hear Coach Hiller make those comments. You didn't hear Coach Allen make those comments. And it's a mix and match. Could it be something as simple as the return of Matt Bedford? I know all of IU fans are looking forward to him manning the fort at left tackle or right tackle, depending on where the Hoosiers want to use him. You've got a couple of younger guys who are getting older, more comfortable with the system, right? Khalil Benson, Carter Smith, Mike Caddick is back for another year. Zach Carpenter, of course, is someone you're looking forward to seeing a lot from this upcoming season. Josh Sales. And then a couple of interesting transfers. Noah Boltikoff comes in from TCU. Max Longman comes in from UMass. Guys that have differing paths coming into Bloomington, but both guys who could end up being very useful this year for the Hoosiers. I'm curious to see what the starting 5 is on opening day, because frankly, I don't have any idea. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing the 5 the Hoosiers throw out there to start the season. Matt, you mentioned you're not expecting Indiana to win this game. Neither am I. But for those of you college football dorks out there, if you look back in recent history, the biggest upset in the Big Ten from a point spread standpoint was in 2019 when Illinois, as a 28.5 point home underdog, knocked off Wisconsin, really good Wisconsin team, at the end of the Lovie Smith tenure, and they the dozens and dozens of fans stormed the field at Memorial Stadium in Champaign. So hey, if you want a bit of inspiration, this is not something that is impossible, something that has happened as recently as 4 years ago. A lot to discuss as far as Ohio State is concerned. Number 3 team in the country as far as the AP Top 25 is concerned. One voter gave them a first place vote for some reason. I don't really understand why, but hey, look, facts are facts. They are behind Georgia and Michigan this year in the AP Top 25. The Buckeyes are a 29-point favorite for Saturday afternoon. The over-under is 58.5. The real blue star studs on the Buckeyes are wide receivers Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, linebacker Tommy Eichenberg, guard Donovan Jackson, defensive lineman JT Tuimoloau. This is an Ohio State team that fields a roster just as good as any in the country. They are currently neck and neck as far as the favorite to win the Big Ten, even though Michigan has made the college football playoff and won the conference in back-to-back seasons. Matt, of course, Indiana has not decided yet on their quarterback. Ohio State hasn't either. But let's dive into Taven Jackson, Brendan Sorsby. I'm not sure if we'll see just one of them for the whole game. I'm not sure if Indiana will rotate. But when you compare and contrast Indiana's quarterback situation last year to this year, what are you excited about and what are you frightened by going into Saturday afternoon?
You said quarterback, right?
Yes.
Just so I'm not.
Jackson
okay, so
Sorsby,
there's a lot going on at quarterback for this team. Dexter Williams, the guy that everybody was excited about ending last year, is still not quite back fully
Nope.
correct,
And
right?
according to the coaches, they're expecting no sign of Williams the first few games, potentially a mid-season return. A lot of fans have pointed out the Maryland game. I wouldn't rule that out necessarily, but mid-season return for Dexter.
Right. But you have a guy who looked good at the end of last year for the Hoosiers and has experience. And you have two guys that are freshmen, right? Competing for the starting job.
At least as far as, yeah, I mean, they are redshirt freshmen.
Yeah, redshirt freshmen. You have Taven Jackson and Brendan Sorsby competing for the starting job. That's going to be fascinating to me to watch how this staff kind of works their way around that. Like, if Taven Jackson throws picks in back-to-back possessions, are we seeing Sorsby? If it's Sorsby out the gate, when is Taven Jackson getting a chance? Is a couple incomplete passes? Are we seeing Taven Jackson run out there, right?
Like, what would you do, Matt?
I'd start Taven Jackson.
Yeah.
And then with Dexter Williams, and I would run Dexter Williams out there and kind of work an offense around him when he comes back, where you kind of go more of the triple option route.
Got it.
But Taven Jackson, again, is more of that. He's actually a pocket passer first. If you've watched film on him, he's a dual threat guy, but he's going to try to throw the ball first. He's not one of those guys. There's a dual threat guy, and the minute he can scrambles, right? Now he's a guy that's going to work through his progressions, and then if he has to run, he is more than capable of getting out in space and making people miss. Or in this case for him, running people over at 6'3", 215. But I kind of like Taven Jackson's game, especially when you have guys like Jalen Lucas, who you want to give time to get open down the field. Cam Camper, who showed a ton of promise. You've got awesome. Donovan McCulley, who I've only heard fantastic things about. You've got other really talented wide receivers. Jaquez Smith hasn't been able to show what he's done, but he was a 4-star guy. Omar Cooper was a sort of 4-star guy. These are all of IU's wide receivers.
DJ Williams, DJ Carter,
Williams as well. It might be the deepest unit on the team. At wide receiver, you just hope that the quarterbacks have time and the ability to show what these guys have in their bags. And hopefully we see that game one. That would be fun to see them cooking Ohio State CBs.
And I'm going to cut in there because, I've said this for the last few years at IU, and it works for whatever NFL team you support if they have an awful offensive line. Like, there are ways to help that out, right? And it's not just a matter of talent as far as the offensive line is concerned. Using those pre-snap motions, using play action to allow those defenders to just freeze for 1/10 of a second or 2/10 of a second, that makes a difference. And of course, from Indiana last year, you saw a team that went rapid fire as far as pace is concerned. Going into this season, Walt Bell has claimed that you might see Indiana go quick. You might see Indiana slow it down. That was his comment earlier today. All he cares about is those explosive plays. I'm looking forward to seeing the running game. That's another tool you can use to help your quarterback, as well as an offensive line that may be less than the level of Ohio State or Michigan or Penn State. Use that running game. Use screen passes. Use a trick play or two. It's all about putting the defense in compromise situations, and they're not sure whether you're running the ball, you're passing the ball, what kind of look are you giving them. So from an offensive line standpoint, that's how I think Indiana can help their quarterback situation. And guess what's worked at IU in the last 30 years? A quarterback that can move. Okay, it's what worked with Antoine Randall. It's what worked with Kellen Lewis. Worked for a little bit with Trey Roberson. Michael Penix and Peyton Ramsey could move in their own right. And you saw Dexter Williams add a level to this offense when he was able to move the pocket, scramble, run those option plays out of the backfield, use the pitch to his benefit. And all you're looking for is little ways for Indiana to find an edge on Saturday, and then week 2 against Indiana State, and then week 3 against Louisville. As far as Indiana's offense, Matt, I'm willing to see Indiana deploy a strategy where they're going back and forth between Taven Jackson and Brendan Sorsby, maybe give each guy a couple of drives, because especially given this context where it's Ohio State and if you lined up every game on the schedule, there's a clear tier of games, which is home Ohio State, at Michigan, at Penn State, where the most important thing from those 3 games is figuring out more about your football team, especially given all the transfers and all the newcomers. And Jackson and Sorsby are 2 of those guys. So I'm willing to give Indiana a long leash here. Look, mix and match the quarterbacks as you want. If you really have that conviction in Taven Jackson, go out there and roll him out there. But you also recruited Brendan Sorsby, just like you recruited Dexter Williams. And the last thing I want to see is Brendan Sorsby play the last 3 games of the season and he lightened the world on fire. So I don't want to see any of that. Look, Indiana can deploy whatever strategy they want to do so from an offensive standpoint. I will say, Matt, if you're more concerned about one side of the ball for Ohio State, I'm more concerned about their offense than I am their defense. They have been shown, you are able to score on them. Indiana unleashed a couple of big plays on them last year. Yep. When you look at IU's offense, who are one or two of the key players you're looking forward to watching outside of the quarterback on Saturday?
What was that question? I'm sorry.
Who are 1 or 2 key offensive players looking forward to watch on Saturday for IU? Because look, Ohio State's defense, right? Ohio State's defense can get a little bit leaky at times. We've seen that, especially, when you're comparing them to Michigan, right? We saw what the Wolverines did against them last year. This is an Ohio State defense where you can move the ball. Indiana's been able to move the ball on Ohio State over the last decade or so. So on Saturday, if you're looking at running backs or receivers or the tight end position, are there 1 or 2 key players you're saying, man, these guys have to deliver Saturday because Ohio State can be scored on?
The return of Cam Camper, of course.
He was good last year.
He was so good to start the year last year. Jalen Lucas. That goes without saying. I think Jalen Lucas. I have heard amazing things about, I believe is it David Holloman?
Holloman, yep. David Holloman, the 3rd, 4th string running back. At least, that's what people would call him right now. He's a running back. Yeah, David Holloman. Yep.
Yeah. I've heard amazing things about David Holloman, and Josh Henderson, of course, returning. But for me, I think it's the running back / wide receiver, Jalen Lucas, and it's Cam Camper. I think those are the guys I'm looking at the most. Yeah.
Let's talk about Jalen Lucas a little bit because we've talked on this podcast on end how it's been tough as far as how Indiana's deployed Jalen Lucas, at least through his first year at Indiana. It's interesting. I think last year they looked at Jalen Lucas saying, we got to keep him on a little bit of a pitch count. The words I heard from IU today were, this is like a pitch minimum, right? It's almost like if you got Clayton Kershaw or Jacob deGrom or Max Scherzer, you're saying, man, you're going 6 innings no matter what. And it feels like Jalen Lucas in this game, it sounds from what I'm hearing at Indiana, they're saying, we're getting him a floor of touches no matter what, whether it's carries or catches. Jalen Lucas, I think, is one of the most dangerous players in college football, and he's on the Indiana Hoosiers. Is there a workload that's too much for Lucas going into the season?
No, it's not. He should touch the ball once a possession. And that's not crazy. Like they should run a play for him once a possession, whether it's a screen pass, whether it's giving him the ball and running him in between the tackles, or running, hopefully for his sake, running around the tackles, right, and getting to the outside, right, because you got to use his speed, right, or lining up in the backfield, then transitioning him out to more of a slot receiver, and then using him there, and trying to get him, either on a cross, or a post, or maybe even a little bit of a bubble screen, right? Like trying to get him the ball in space in any way you can, given what the defense is playing, would be ideal for this team. Now, they're not going to do that because they've shown even last year, when he was really the only electric option they had down the stretch, that they're still not going to do that. I hope for his sake that he's at least out there for like 70 to 80% of the possessions, because even if they're not running a play for him, he can just break free at a moment's notice, and then all of a sudden it's his ball, right? It's his down.
That's the crazy thing about all of this. Everyone's sitting here and saying Indiana's the 6th best team in the East, 7th best team in the East. Yet one of the most lethal players in the country who's getting All-American recognition is wearing the cream and the crimson. And it's like, for all of the coaches and for all the players on this team, who are looking to write their own story this year at Indiana and change the ways of the last couple of years, you've got a weapon here that's really dangerous, in addition to a couple of the other guys that you talked about with Josh Henderson and Cam Camper, who, of course, are trying to start a new streak for Indiana as far as NFL draft picks coming up this spring. Let's turn the tables here, Matt, because
quickly. Last thing I'll say is I want to see IU use Jalen Lucas like USC used Zachariah Branch.
Right.
So
week 0 reference already.
Week 0 reference already. If you guys watched any highlights from the USC game this weekend, USC was one of the few teams that played in week 0. They have a fantastic, very talented true freshman 5-star in Zachariah Branch. He had a kick return for a touchdown. He almost had a punt return for a touchdown. He had, I think, like 70 to 80 yards receiving and then like 20 yards rushing. They tried to get him the ball any way they could in space, including, like a jet sweep, I think was what the running play, right? Like that stuff, that's the kind of attention that Jalen Lucas needs, right?
Yes.
Because he's got that same sort of ability to just absolutely destroy people in space.
And that's all it takes, and we saw Indiana use him for a long touchdown against Purdue last year. And of course, this game and his ability in the kick return game. And at the end of the day, Matt, Ohio State has way more pressure on their shoulders in this game than Indiana does. And I'm talking even from a style point perspective. If Ohio State wins this game by 10 points or 14 points or 21 points, there are going to be rumblings and grumblings and mumblings in Columbus. They're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
And so if you're Indiana here, it's a lot different than the season opener last year, where Indiana really had to beat the Illinois Fighting Illini at home in prime time. We didn't even know how good Illinois was going to be. But this year, you have a chance to get a little crazy, get a little weird, and Jalen Lucas has to be a part of that. You saw San Jose State compete for 3 quarters against USC on the road. This time, Indiana's hosting Ohio State. So I'm looking forward to seeing IU. I don't want to say roll the dice or take risks, because I think the bigger risk would be to play super conservatively. I would say, go out there, pedal to the metal, and you know what? If it backfires, you throw out the bad plays and going into week 2 against Indiana State. But I think this is a game where you can see a double pass and have it work. You can use a flea flicker and see what happens. You can try a hook and ladder in the second half to see if it maybe creates something from an offensive standpoint. College football is known for being a little wacky. And whether it's
Put some stuff on tape,
or Josh Henderson or EJ Williams or Taven Jackson or Brendan Sorsby or whatever, it's known for being a little wacky. Now, don't be stupid. Don't end up as a meme. We don't want too many of those. Let's just settle with the student section without shirts from a couple years ago. Let's just settle for that. But all I'm saying is college football is the opportunity to have a little fun. And Indiana's got a team where it feels like they've got a potential NFL running back in Josh Henderson. They have the explosiveness of Jalen Lucas. You're right. David Holloman, as well as Christian Turner, have gotten a lot of positive publicity over the course of the preseason, and the wide receiving group. Bob Bostad coaching the offensive line. Like Indiana, from a resource standpoint, from a competence standpoint, should be a lot different than they were last year. And I don't want to see a boring, buttoned up, uninteresting game plan on Saturday, especially from an offensive standpoint. Get on SportsCenter. Do something fun, right? Have a couple of YouTube moments. Indiana had a few of those at the end of last year. Keep that rolling. Let's turn the tables here, Matt, because unfortunately, Ohio State, regardless of who they play at quarterback, is going to be looking to put up a crooked number at Memorial Stadium on Saturday. They put up a number in the 50s a couple of years ago at Memorial Stadium. That was with CJ Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. It's a different cast of characters this year. I'm not sure how much the drop-off is. What, if anything, can Indiana do to even put a little bit of hesitancy and concern in this Ohio State offense?
You got to hope that Ohio State's QB situation is as bad as people are making it out to be. Right? You got to hope that Kyle McCord, or I
Devin
think
Brown. Yeah.
Devin Brown. You got to hope they're not ready. Like they aren't prepared, right? Because they start missing reads,
or they're arrogant.
They're arrogant. They're trying to force things. Maybe they're a bit rusty, right? And overthrowing on things. You got to hope for mistakes out of Ohio State rather than you making a play, because I don't see IU's defensive line really putting a ton of pressure on the QB. They're gonna get their throws off. The more time that comes off, the play clock, right? More times that come off the clock during a single play, the more likely the best player in college football is going to be open, right? It's just a matter of time, right? Like, and if he's not open, then Aguka's open, or Julian Fleming's open, or
Stover, the tight end,
Cade
running
Stover's
backs.
open, right? Yeah, I didn't even mention the running backs, right? Like, there's so many weapons for IU to account for here that it is not feasible for IU to be able to compete with them. They don't get the DBs, they don't get the linebackers. God bless Taiwan. Even Taiwan Mullen couldn't keep up with
That's true.
The boys last year, Marvin Harrison, right? Like, so how is that going to change this year? It's not, right? It's just not. Now, the play calling, you can be a little bit more aggressive, right? You can make them a little bit uncomfortable. But like I said, you got to hope for mistakes out of Ohio State rather than actually making plays, because the team doesn't have the talent to make plays. The team 2 years ago, right? Sure. That defense had the talent to go make plays, right? They didn't do it. But that team had the talent, and obviously with injuries and whatnot, they slowly, the talent slowly disintegrated, right, and dwindled away. But this team doesn't have that, right? Sure. There's certain standout players for this team. Like, I'm extremely excited to see Andre Carter play. Of course. I think that against less talented teams, somebody like a Josh Shangetti is going to kind of show what he's kind of made of. Jameer Johnson as well. Yep. Right. Some guys that have some experience, but also like are playing a much bigger role now. And then obviously the two Caseys in the middle of the linebacker position. But they, again, it's first game of the season against a team that, this is an NFL offense. Like, I'm sorry that this is like Ohio State's, their two running backs. Travion Henderson's going to be playing on Sundays. Ryan Williams will be playing on Sundays. Yeah. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a top 5 pick.
Ibuka's a first rounder.
Not even his first round. He might be right behind Marvin Harrison. Right. Like, Stover's probably going to be like an early second, maybe. Right. Like, I think he's that good too. Offensive line, don't even get me started. I think they go too deep with the offensive line.
But do they have a draft pick at quarterback?
That's what I'm saying. It's the one weakness where I say is I'm not sure what their quarterback situation is going to look like. Now, we said that a couple years ago, and then CJ Stroud stepped in there and completely took over college football, right? And the same sort of situation, right? Like, Stroud was stepping in. How good is he going to actually be? He has this amazing wide receiver core. He's got this amazing running back, right? How is he going to fare? And then he ended up, competing for the Heisman Trophy that year, right? And Ohio State very well could end up, with Kyle McCord, going and doing it. But I think he's going to be the starter. But Kyle McCord could very well end up doing that. But we haven't seen it yet, and it's the fact that we haven't seen it yet out of him, and that question mark is way, 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 way easier to take advantage of if you're a defense than anything else on, maybe other than offensive line. And it goes like offensive line first as a weakness, and then QB, right? Like, obviously, right? Like, because your QB can't function if you don't have an offensive line, but your offense can't function if you don't have a QB. So,
I mean, that is true. I mean, it will be interesting to see what kind of pocket presence McCord and Devin Brown have as well. They are very different as far as their style of quarterbacking, but when they're getting pressured, do they speed things up? Do they make mistakes? We talk about Stroud. I was kind of fascinated by CJ Stroud's development as a quarterback just because the start of his career was not good. Like, his first game was at Minnesota. He was not He was not what we now remember CJ Stroud as in that first game. By the way, a game where Minnesota, it's a pretty big underdog. I think it was 14 or 17 points at home. They fought tooth and nail with the Buckeyes, similar to how Indiana did back in 2017. And then Ohio State pulled away in the fourth quarter. But we sat here and we saw CJ Stroud have a little bit of a shaky first game. The one certainty there, though, was that Stroud was taking every snap. And this is a little different for the Buckeyes, where the quarterback is different, and it's not the same guy. It's not Justin Fields. It's not JT Barrett. It's not Dwayne Haskins. It's not CJ Stroud. It is either Kyle McCord or Devin Brown. That tells you that Ohio State isn't all too certain which direction this is going to go. But the one thing I need to see out of Indiana is, whether it's through the defensive line alone or through blitzing, get in the backfield against these guys. And the defensive line, I do think, will have its moments in this game. I think Ohio State's offensive line is very good, but I think Indiana has multiple players that can generate pressure, win one-on-one battles to get in the backfield and either get tackles for loss in the running game or to flush to the quarterbacks in the passing game. And all I'm saying is Ohio State will make 4 or 5 plays on Saturday that should result in an Indiana takeaway. Right? It could be maybe the ball handler is a little loose with the football. It could be that Kyle McCord isn't seeing the blindside pressure. It could be Devin Brown is a little reckless with his accuracy. But you'll see them as the game goes on. There'll be 4 or 5 plays. And Indiana has to capitalize on those, because the last 2 years have been shambolic as far as Indiana's ability to take the football away, which is a hallmark of the Tom Allen defense from the time he was the defensive coordinator.
That used to be the strength of this.
You have, and it's not even just like, I mean, there's a lot of good luck involved in that. There's a lot of positive variance involved in that, but there's also a technical soundness that you have, as far as where I'm not here just to tackle you or push you out of bounds. I'm here to punch the ball away. I'm here to strip the quarterback of the football when I'm coming at him from his blind side. I'm not just here for the sack. I'm here for the strip. I'm tomahawking the ball out of the guy's hands. I'm peanut punching the ball out of the guy's hands so I can force a fumble and see if my team can recover it. So there are going to be 4 or 5 plays, and I need to see Indiana make those key turn those plays into actual takeaways for the Hoosier defense. And then the other side of it is just do your job. You know, and I know it sounds crazy. And look, Ohio State's probably going to put up 30 points every game they played this season. But all I'm saying is, if Marvin Harrison goes for 300 receiving yards against you, look, he's really good. Jackson Smith and Jigba did that against Utah a couple of years ago. Okay. At the same time, I don't want to see busted coverages. I don't want to see idiotic penalties where Indiana's hitting guys out of bounds well after the play is done. I don't want to see timeouts burned on the defensive side of the ball because you're not organized. Do what Indiana has to do correctly. And then if Ohio State drops 50 on you, I can live with that. But play assignment defense, play to your roles, play to your assignments, play to your responsibilities. And then if their first-round talent wins out, you live with it. Matt and I will talk more about this matchup here and give you our predictions in just a moment. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And we are starting to see more and more fall sports get underway at Indiana University. The men's soccer team, the women's soccer team, the volleyball team, all in action and all succeeding. Indiana's women's team beat Evansville on Sunday, 1-0 on the road. Volleyball team had a very productive weekend opening the season. Men's soccer doing their thing as usual. Contentious draw to start the year. And you know what? You know they're going to be in the mix as far as the NCAA tournament is concerned. For those of you that are just starting school, go out and get to as many sporting events as you can. Volleyball is awesome to go to. Soccer matches are awesome to go to. They are always a good time. Make sure you set aside some time for that if you are on campus at Indiana University. But folks, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. Matt, no one's expecting Indiana to win, but as far as the different units on this team, which one are you most looking forward to watching on Saturday afternoon? This was our Hoosier Sound podcast poll earlier that we just sent out over on Twitter at the Hoosier Sound and at Indiana HQ. Are you looking forward to watching quarterbacks most? Are you looking to watch the running backs and receivers the most? The defensive line? What part of the team are you looking forward to watching the most on Saturday?
The running backs and receivers is the easy answer. I mean,
Really?
they're the fun.
I don't think it's an easy answer. All right.
I think it's an easy answer. I think they're the most fun, and I think they're the best unit on the team. So
okay. There you go. All right. Easy enough. I'm looking forward to seeing the trenches, Matt. I love trench play. Let's go.
I'm not looking forward to seeing
it. I am fired up. I want to see sacks of Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. I want to see tackles for loss. You know, one of the most underrated aspects of those Indiana teams that won a bunch of games in 2019 and 2020, it was Big Daddy Jerome Johnson on the inside, and it was Big CO creating disruption, and that allowed the pass rushers to get into the backfield and put the quarterback off his spot. And of course, on the offensive side, do I even need to get into it? I mean, Indiana has to have 5 up front that can keep people away from Taven Jackson or Brendan Sorsby. You got no shot if you've got a bottom-rate offensive line in the Big Ten. So yep. I don't care. And I don't care, if you get out of the Big Ten East next year. Okay, if your offensive line is one of the 10 worst in football or 20 worst in football, you are cooked. And by the way, it can't be something that you fix after 8 weeks in the season. It has to be that way from the beginning. So I'm looking forward to seeing the trenches. I know a lot of you are probably excited to watch the quarterbacks take the field on Saturday afternoon, but we asked all of you, which part of IU's team are you looking forward to watching the most on Saturday? And Matt, right now, quarterbacks lead the way at 37%, with the offensive and defensive line coming in at 36%. The running backs and receivers are at 24%, with other coming in at 2%. I liked Shaw Law's comment into our podcast poll. He says, look, this account says, look, I want to see a team that looks well coached, few penalties, good effort, better play calling. I think it's a valid point, right? Like, whether or not you're looking for specific positions or players to do well, go out, play smart, disciplined football. And if you can do that, all of a sudden the outlook does look better for the rest of the year. Folks, if you are curious, Indiana is plus 390 on FanDuel to win 6 games this year. So that's about a 20 to 25% implied probability. That's the kind of, it's about 20% implied probability. So look, that's what the odds makers are pinning Indiana at as far as making a bowl game this year. I do think there are chances, Matt. And so as we look at this game on Saturday, first and foremost, again, Ohio State's a 29-point favorite. Okay, the over-under is 58.5. If you do the math, that means Ohio State is something like a 45 to 14, like 44 to 15 winner in Bloomington on Saturday afternoon. Who do you have winning the game, and what's your score line?
So I have Ohio State winning the game. No surprise to anybody.
Me too.
I will tell you this. I think the game is going to be uncomfortable for Ohio State.
Okay.
For the first quarter and a half. Okay. And I think they'll probably get a late touchdown or 2 in the second quarter to kind of push it out to like a 2 or 3 touchdown lead. Yeah. And then probably won't look back after that in the second half, and they'll probably be playing their backups in the fourth quarter. So I'm assuming that it'll probably end up being, I'm going to hit the over actually, because I think Indiana's going to end up scoring on their defense. I just don't think they're going to be able to stop Ohio State. So I think it'll probably end up being like 56. 31.
Okay, great. And for the folks who are thinking about heading over to Memorial Stadium on Saturday afternoon, and last time I checked, it looked like the weather was looking really nice as far as kickoff on Saturday, and it is still the case. Sunny out, temperature in like the low 80s. So, we'll see what the wind looks like going into Saturday, but otherwise should be a really, really ideal day for football on Saturday in Bloomington. I'm going to also have Ohio State winning this game, Matt. I'm actually going to take it the other way. I think maybe this game will be a little bit more low scoring than people expect. I'm going to say Ohio State takes this one by a score of 38 to 17. Okay, I think it's going to be about 38-17 on Saturday. I'll be honest with you. So I sat in I look back, I should say, and listen to Indiana's comments earlier today. Again, Coach Allen, Bell, Guerrieri. The coaching staff, especially when I consider that we're adding Bob Bostad to this mix as well. He didn't speak, but of course, we all respect his experience. They said all the right things. And I feel like there is a quiet confidence that the staff has in the players that are on their roster. And it's different to me than the comments that I heard from the staff over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So I do feel like, okay, there again, Tom Allen even said, look, we acknowledge that there are limited expectations for this team as far as winning this game on Saturday, but this is why you go to Indiana. It's to play in games like this. It's to play your tail off. It's to play for the fans that are in the building, the Hoosier Nation that has stuck with this team even through the last couple of tough years. Like this is why you go to Indiana. And I think Indiana, from a defensive standpoint, is going to show a little more than they have the last two seasons. They have to, right? It's hard to be worse. But O-line, defense, I'm expecting better. And, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Taven Jackson and Brendan Sorsby. But I think Walt Bell is going to rely on his running game to create some big plays. There are going to be some awful ones, but I am looking forward to seeing Indiana do that. So that's what Matt and I think about this game Saturday afternoon. I'm really looking forward to seeing the Hoosiers kick off football season. I think there are going to be a few twists and turns here. I will say I enjoyed watching Indiana in the season opener last year. And then I enjoyed watching Indiana for about 3 quarters at the end of the year. It was the second half against Michigan State, and it was the first quarter against Purdue, right? Mm-hmm. The entire middle was god-awful and really frustrating to watch. I guess you could say the first quarter against Michigan, but even that was a bit awkward with the Mike Hart medical emergency that took place at the early part of that game. So I'm telling you, like there was the Western Kentucky game was painful to watch. The Idaho game was painful to watch. A lot of the losses are painful to watch, which it doesn't always have to be that way. Matt, Indiana's got 12 games on their schedule this year. We're not going to go through and list off every game on IU's schedule, but you've seen it, Matt, and you know what the over-under looks like this year. What do you think Indiana's record finishes at this season, and what are 1 or 2 thoughts you have on the team overall this year?
I think they hit 3 wins. And I think it'll probably be the 3. It'll be 2 of the non-conference wins. Yeah. I think they'll probably end up dropping a game to Louisville. I think Louisville's probably a little bit further ahead of like a team than IU is. And then they'll win one of the Big Ten games. Whether it's Rutgers or Michigan State, I don't know, but they'll win one of the Big Ten games. And as depressing as that sounds, I feel like there's going to be a lot of positive things to take away from the season, even though the team has a worse record than they did last year.
Right.
Like I think there's going to be positive players on this team. I just think the defense, they're putting too many pieces together, and with a new play caller there's just going to be some ups and downs, right?
Sure.
And there's a lot of really good offenses in this conference, and Indiana's playing a pretty difficult schedule to begin with. And it's the last year of this stupidly difficult schedule that they have to play every single year, right? And so I just, again, I think 3 wins, but I think you can have 3 wins and it'd still be an okay season as long as you make games competitive. And the 3 wins I'm talking about being, are 3 wins is fine. The games I think Indiana could be competitive with are every game outside of, I can think they'd be competitive with Ohio State. I don't think they'll be competitive with Penn State and Happy Valley. I don't think they're going to be competitive with Michigan. But outside of that,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And then both those games are on the road. Outside of that, I think Indiana can be competitive with anybody, and anybody that comes into Bloomington should be afraid that they're going to get put on a poster, right?
I would think so. I mean, I see what you're saying, and first and foremost, I like that Indiana has 2 gimmies in the non-conference slate. Okay, I mean, look, Akron is a little tricky this year. Okay, I mean, I'm not joking when I say that. Like they are a team on the come up. But I also think you're getting Akron at a good time. They would have just finished a road game the previous week at Kentucky, so I'm fairly confident Indiana will do their job against Akron in week 4, and of course Indiana State week 2. So you bank the 2, right? I mean, you feel good about that, right? There isn't a Cincinnati on the slate, and there isn't a Western Kentucky on the slate. Again, Indiana swapped out Western Kentucky and added Akron. Okay, and look, Western Kentucky is my favorite group of 5 team. Okay, so I have so much respect for that university. They are playing. It's funny, we talk so much about the talent gap between Ohio State and Indiana, right? Like, if you ask me, I mean, this is probably a hot take. I think the talent gap between IU and Ohio State is less than sort of the gap in resources and what you can work with, and materials and all this sort of thing between Indiana and a group of 5 team. Okay, like, the playing field. Yeah. The playing field favors Power 5 teams a lot more. Okay, and so I know we're frustrated whenever we see, Indiana, Ohio State, but Indiana is just going into every game against a group of 5 team at an advantage. And Western Kentucky, we saw the last couple of years how difficult they made it on the Hoosiers, and even a Michigan State team that they've played over the last couple of years as well. With that said, I think Indiana's getting to 6. So I'm taking the 2, right? Taking the 2 obvious ones. I'm taking the Rutgers win at home. You gotta get the Rutgers win at home. I'm taking the Michigan State win at home. I am very I don't think Michigan State is serious with Mel Tucker as their head coach. And I saw Mel Tucker do that as a defensive coordinator with the Bears. And I'm happy that he struck gold with the transfer season that he had with Kenneth Walker. There's no one like Kenneth Walker on this team. Okay. Yeah. And so maybe in a couple of years, Michigan State will be good. And I think Michigan State will very much, like Indiana, embrace the new day and age in the Big Ten. But if this game was in East Lansing, I'd take Michigan State. It's in Bloomington. I'm taking Indiana. It's also Indiana Senior Day. Then you got to find a couple others, right? And it's not going to be the big 3 in this league. But I'm very excited to watch Indiana go on the road and face Maryland, Illinois, and Purdue. You get the home game against Wisconsin, and then you get the neutral against Louisville. I think Louisville, more often than not, beats Indiana on a neutral site. That's not breaking news. But Louisville is going to go to Georgia Tech in week 1. They're going to have a lot of their stuff on tape. Indiana and Louisville both get an easy game in week 2. And I'm excited because Indiana has, I said Ohio State has more to lose in week 1. Indiana's got more to lose in week 3 against Louisville. There's a lot more pressure on this team's shoulders in this neutral site game against Louisville. And I want to see this coaching staff take the lessons learned from week 1 and week 2 and go ham in week 3. Okay. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing in Lucas Oil Stadium against Jeff Brom. It feels like an identity game for Tom Allen. And we'll get more into it in a couple of weeks when we preview that game. But I think Indiana finds a way to steal 2 against that other group, whether it's the neutral game against Louisville. You get Maryland the week after they play at Penn State. At Michigan State. Indiana the previous week gets Akron at home. I think Indiana finds a way to get to 6. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. I wouldn't bet it necessarily, but I am saying that if you go out in week 1 and put up a good fight and you learn a lot about your team, and then you get 2 more weeks of practice with the quarterbacks and you stay healthy, I think there's a path for this team to get to 6. It could easily look stupid when it's all said and done, but I think there's a lot of national discourse right now about Tom Allen's job being on the line, about Indiana just kind of running themselves into the ground after the last couple of seasons, when in reality, Tom Allen is the one guy that has had any modicum of success in Indiana over the last 50 years. The last 30 years. Yeah. So he actually has the blueprint to what it takes to winning games in the Big Ten East. And it's not gonna happen easily. But of course, Louisville is the game where everything swings. And I'm looking forward to watching that coming up in a couple of weeks. I've got 6-6. And you know what? If it looks stupid, it looks stupid. Looking forward to seeing Indiana take the field on Saturday. against the Buckeyes. So much to discuss. We're powering through this podcast episode here at the end of August. So much to think about, Matt. We're gonna dive into the Big Ten picks of the week in just a minute and talk a little IU basketball. But first, it's time for a quick social media shout out. I love what the social media team is doing right now for the Indiana men's basketball program. They are profiling a lot of the younger players. You're getting to know them. There are 2-3 minute interviews that team did with Kel'el Ware, with Mackenzie Mbako. Mbako's was just released by the Indiana MBB Twitter account. It is so helpful to get a little better of an understanding with each of these newcomers as they join the team. I'm pumped to see that roster jersey numbers were released. That's always a fun moment if you ask me every year. It's going to be interesting to see Mackenzie Mbako or Jerome Hunter's old number. I don't know. That was the first thing I saw whenever I looked at those numbers getting released. So looking forward to seeing the Hoosiers take the court in November. We're going to talk about that program in just a bit. But first, a reminder, folks, you can find us on social media at Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Matt, on Instagram, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
Super. And that's where you can find us. There, join the masses here, folks. We're almost at 10,000 followers on Twitter. Hopefully that app doesn't crash a burning, fiery death anytime soon. A lot of games to discuss, Matt, as far as week one is concerned. There's obviously some cupcake matchups. There are also some actual Big Ten versus Big Ten games, 3 of them, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. One thing we always like to do on this podcast, folks, and we're going to do this every week throughout the course of the season, is give you 1 or 2 picks of the week from our end as far as Big Ten games are concerned. Games this week in the conference range from Thursday all the way to Sunday. We're going to look at the various point spreads and over-unders, maybe pick an upset if there's something we really like. Matt, as you look at all the different games on the schedule in the Big Ten, what are 1 or 2 picks that you like that the fans can tail if they are so inclined?
All right, so bets for the spread, aka teams to cover. I like Michigan State at home 2 touchdowns over Central Michigan.
Yeah.
I think they probably get that done. I think they probably cover that. I also like a straight up upset pick. Ooh. Fresno over Purdue.
Straight up.
I think that is a spicy matchup. I know it's the first game back.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I like Fresno going into Purdue and beating Purdue.
It's real spicy. Okay.
Yeah, there's my 2.
Wonderful. All right. I got a couple. My point spread pick, I'm gonna take Rutgers to cover 6.5 on Sunday afternoon against Northwestern.
They were almost my upset pick.
I think Northwestern's going over this year. I really do. And maybe they snag one. They've got a home non-conference game against Howard that I think they might. I don't even think. Anyway, Rutgers. I think Rutgers is 6.5 points better than Northwestern. So yeah, I think Rutgers is covering that at home. And then even with the low point total, like I can easily see that game being 17-0, and we just call it there. My upset is going to be Toledo going to Champaign, straight up, knocking off Illinois. There's a little bit of an injury concern on the Toledo side. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're a really good football team. The MAC preseason favorites, Daquan Finn, is awesome. They have a corner who's going to be one of the first ones taken in the NFL draft as well. I think Illinois' stock is a little inflated right now. And straight up, if you want, you could take the 9.5. I'd prefer taking that with it going out to 10. With that said, I think Toledo wins. I think especially if you want to do it this way, I think they win the first half. Maybe Illinois' Big Ten talent base takes over in the second half, but I really like Toledo in that game. So that's how Matt and I feel as far as the Big Ten is concerned. The opening week, we'll give you a couple of our thoughts here. We are not responsible for any losses, but as Matt and I pointed out, we are responsible for the wins. So as we discuss the football team here, look, Indiana's got so much to think about, so much to look forward to this season. It's going to be fun to see a lot of new faces and new places on the IU football roster. But Matt, there have been a couple of fun news drops as far as the IU men's basketball program is concerned. We got matchups finally in the Empire Classic in New York City in November. We also got the announcement that Indiana will participate in the Battle for Atlantis in 2024. Indiana's getting UConn first, Matt. Madison Square Garden. Then they face Texas and Louisville in the second game, depending on how things go. How much are you looking forward to the Indiana facing the defending champs in the Empire Classic? Coach Hurley going to run the Huskies. Indiana, of course, gets a couple of games real quick to figure out who they are this season.
I'm kind of mad they didn't get Louisville in the first game, so we could have gotten a cupcake, but I knew they probably weren't going to do that. They're probably going to match them against Texas or UConn. I'm fine. It makes our non-conference schedule look significantly better. But now you're playing Kansas at home and you're playing UConn as well on a neutral, and then Auburn on a neutral as well. I think those 3 games are great. And again, it's against 3 different leagues, right? You play the SEC, you play the Big 12, and you play. So come March Madness time, IU has a decent resume to stack up against everybody else because you can kind of see how they went against other conferences. But also, if you do well, as far as seeding goes, now it makes it a little bit easier for IU fans to kind of predict how far they can go because now there's, Auburn's played this team, it's played this team, and then we're playing in the NCAA tournament if we go this far, right? Like, so there's there's a lot of positives about playing UConn. Semicolon, however, comma, again, would have liked to play Louisville first. That way would have been the championship game playing probably UConn, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but what are we saw this last year too, didn't we? To some degree, of course, not in the tournament style, but when Indiana had to face Kansas, North Carolina, Arizona, and Xavier, it was like, all right, if you can split those 4, you'll set yourself up pretty nicely for the rest of the season. And last year, Indiana went to Xavier and won. This year, you obviously look at this and you go, hey, if you can take 2 of the 4, it's 4, right? Yeah, Kansas, yep. Auburn, yeah, Kansas, Auburn, the 2 Empire Classic games. If you split them, especially if you can also beat UConn and get Texas, then you feel pretty good. If Indiana loses to UConn and Louisville loses to Texas, there's a little luster lost there as far as the 3rd place game of the Empire Classic, but you, of course, will do your best to make that up in Big Ten play. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, look, when you combine the Empire Classic, Matt, of course, Indiana now has faced the defending national champions in consecutive seasons. And then you take the Empire Classic in this year's non-conference and you combine it with the Battle for Atlantis in the following season, you're really starting to see what Mike Woodson's non-conference schedule looks like in comparison to Tom Crean and Archie Miller's. The Battle for Atlantis, again, a year from this upcoming fall, so in the fall of 2024, that'll include Arizona, Gonzaga, Louisville, Creighton, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Davidson, and Indiana, a jam-packed collection of teams. This is what it was all about, right, Matt? And of course, Indiana's going to get 3 games out of this instead of the typical 2 that you see in like the Empire Classic, for example. This is why the Hoosiers gave up the Crossroads Classic. It's why Indiana was okay with the Big Ten ACC Challenge falling through here. Going to the Bahamas, set yourself up. This was long overdue to see IU in this tournament. How fired up are you to see Indiana in the Battle for Atlantis?
I like it. I think it's a good opportunity, and it's like will be nice because I think I'm going to go because it's right across. It's right across the.
That's right, yeah,
from my house. So down in Florida. So I think it'd be fun to go, and I think it's a good opportunity. Again, you saw IU. I believe IU played an exhibition game in the Bahamas.
Yeah, a couple of exhibitions.
Yeah, a couple of exhibitions in the Bahamas. So this should come to surprise nobody that Mike Woodson would like to go back and chill at the beach with a margarita in hand. So that'll be fun for the guys. And again, it's a jam-packed group there, and so a lot of marquee games, and especially for a team that hopefully, fingers crossed, Indiana's going to be in the top 25-ish with a top 5 recruiting class, maybe. Possibly.
That was the point I was going to make. You took the words right out of my mouth, right? Of course, so many visits coming up here over the next couple of months as far as class of 2024 recruits visiting Bloomington, and whoever decides to commit, they got a little carrot at the end of the stick real quick. Even if you're good enough to just play 1 season at Indiana, wow, what a field to go up against in the Battle for Atlantis. It's funny because it's not the same tournament, but with PK85, Indiana got a lot of film with Kel'el Ware. and you saw, okay, when he plays 3 games in 3 days or 3 games in a short period of time against a bunch of Power 5 opponents, what does it look like? Well, you saw it. And you didn't have to second guess yourself when you go after a player like Ware in the portal. Indiana's going to have 3 games against 3 quality opponents in the battle for Atlantis in the fall of 2024. Excited to see that, especially considering, it's no longer the times where Indiana plays a mediocre ACC team, a little bit above average Big East team, and then Notre Dame or Butler, right? I love the transition that this program is making as far as more higher level non-conference opposition in these big tournaments. Matt,
putting Indiana back on the map as far as being a top non-conference player.
I don't know. Just as far as, look, I almost look at it a different way. It's not even like back on the map. It is, you are going out and you are figuring, if Indiana beats Notre Dame by 20, I don't really know how good Indiana is. Right? And I'm okay with them going to Allen Fieldhouse and getting their rear end kicked. I'm okay with them facing Arizona on a neutral site and seeing how that game goes. And so all I'm saying is the only way you find out who you are is by playing in the battle for Atlantis. It's by playing against UConn. It's by playing against Kansas. In the day and age of the transfer portal and NIL, your team's changing every season. This is how you figure yourself out, and this is the way you get a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, not just settle with an 8 or a 10 or a 12, just getting in. That's not enough. You got to figure out how good you are, and then you can leverage your fan base and the high profile nature of your program to take advantage of that. Man, as we wind down on this Monday night, any closing thoughts here? IU football takes on Ohio State Saturday. Experimental game. You get to learn a lot about your team going ahead into the rest of the season. And then, of course, anything IU basketball related as we close up here on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, it's just nice to have football back. I think I said that last podcast, but it's true. The off season for a podcaster just sucks. Because it's like we have to come up with random BS. Now, this year was a little bit easier because of the transfer portal madness that was going on with basketball. Yeah. But normally it's a bit of a drag. So it's nice to have, a bit of a routine back. And now it goes college football starts and then I'm busy until March, right? Which is amazing.
By March you mean like June.
Like the first week of June, right? So it's actually perfect. It's been a long 3 months without having any major college sports, and I'm needed it back in my life. And then, I would love to be, surprised by this IU football team. I'm a little bit more pessimistic than a lot of the IU fans, I know. So, I get it. If you're listening to the podcast, you're like, God dang it, Matt, here we go again. Like he's being negative, but I think again, IU is at a severe disadvantage when it comes to talent, when it comes to, just togetherness, like a cohesion, I guess is what it's not together. It's cohesion. Given the fact you're adding a lot of new pieces, like they're just behind 8 ball on a lot of different things. And I think the new Big Ten is going to be very good for them, depending on what the staff does and what the AD decides to go with at head coach or for a head coach's leash, I should say, as going into the new future of the Big Ten. And then for basketball wise, I mean, everything's rosy for basketball for the most part. We missed out on, what's his name? Indianapolis center.
Not Flory, right? You're talking about Flory?
Yeah, Flory. Yeah. I mean, Indiana wasn't really pursuing him too heavily. That recruitment was wild. He ended up going to Kansas.
Yeah.
When everybody said that he's going to Auburn. Wild stuff. But recruiting's always crazy. But from what I've heard about recruiting for IU basketball, I think IU fans should be expecting some good news shortly. Actually, I think from what I've heard, it's sometime in September. As far as the first of the 5 stars to start committing, and hopefully to IU. So, I'm hoping that IU fans will hear something in September. That would be dope.
Yeah, that would be dope. As far as what I had to say, not much more. All I know is, like, if you decided in the last calendar year to play football at Indiana University, you're doing so because you kind of want to forge your own path, right? You want to make your own story. You don't want to be the next in line at a big program like Ohio State or Michigan or Texas or Florida. You're not saying, I'll just go there. Like Andre Carter could have gone there and he would have just been the next guy there, right? He'd been one of a million. At Indiana, right? And you know, every win is a seismic, massive event. And it's not exactly because, I mean, it's fine, right? I'm okay with that. I'm comfortable with it being that way. I can vividly remember every detail of Indiana's win against Illinois last year, the win at Michigan State last year. It was awesome, right? Those are the stories you tell to future generations of Hoosier fans for the rest of your life. It was a miserable season. Then we went into East Lansing and we were getting our rear end kicked. And you know what happened? Matt, you know what happened? Well, Indiana came back from a billion scores down and won a hell of a game in overtime as the snow was falling in East Lansing. And wow, what an awesome, like that's what it's all about. That's all Hoosier fans look forward to doing. It's all about, hey, bragging to your friends and family and coworkers that go to a rival school and saying, ha, take that. You know, it was hilarious. Indiana fans have bragging rights on Illinois fans, even though Illinois was a great team last year. So look, I'm not saying Indiana's going to beat Ohio State on Saturday, but there are opportunities for IU to have a really, really good season this year. And I know the expectations are down, but that's exactly when you can swoop in and have a year like you had in 2019 and say, folks, we're a little bit more dangerous than you think we might be. So, folks, that about wraps it up for our 304th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today. Be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.